Hello everyone, this video you are watching is actually a fraction of a much greater video idea. This main idea I've decided to express in two different videos because I think they are sufficiently independent in the sense that they can both make sense on their own, such that if I were to have them together, people might complain that I'm not getting to the point or I've deviated too much. However, I do think a better understanding would be achieved by watching both. So, this video was originally planned to be part of, but is now an extract of the video on the Fullbringers, Kugo, and Jushiro's tale, which you should watch after you are done with this video when I do upload it. I want to make a promise, but I'm not going to make promises, but I will say that I'll try my best to get the video out by next week. Disclaimer. This video is going to take into account information presented in the novels. Whether or not the novels are canon will be addressed in a future video. So don't bring that smoke into this video. And also, timestamps will be in the comment section, hopefully. In today's video, I have 4 objectives, and they are to carry out 1. A detailed explanation of what Fullbringers are. 2. Examine potential conflicts and complements between the manga and novels. Carry out character analyses in relation to Fullbring, and 4. Examine a particular writing technique with respect to Orihime. Let's get started. To understand what a Fullbringer is, one must be aware that there are 4 or 3 main races within the Bleachverse. This includes humans, Quincy's, Hollows, and Soul Reapers. The differences between them are differences in physiology and spirit energy. At a base level, these different categories all have differing spirit energy and can be identified based on their spirit energy signature. On a side note, I have opted to represent differences in spirit energy as differences in texture and form as opposed to color, because color could be misleading, as a certain color of spirit energy, or rather spirit pressure, is not unique to one category or another. For example, while Kenpachi emits golden yellow Reiatsu, so does Noitora. I have also opted to use the same representation for Quincy's and humans only because there seems to be multiple overlaps, as you shall see. But this illustration is in no way claiming that they are completely equivalent. Anyway, spirit ribbons or Reiraku are manifestations of set spirit energy and have unique colors corresponding to the aforementioned different categories. Soul Reapers, for example, have red colored spirit ribbons, and that is how Uryu was able to know that Rukia was a Soul Reaper and that Ichigo changed and gained Soul Reaper powers. Whether or not Hollows show different colors and what color their spirit ribbons are is unknown. The green you see in the illustration for Hollows is really just a random color I've chosen to keep the illustrations visually distinct. We only know that these spirit ribbons are white for humans and evidently white for Quincy's as well, since Uryu appeared to display white spirit ribbons like other humans such as Chad's friend Yuichi, for whom we've seen his spirit ribbons, when Ichigo utilized them to locate the boy. This overlap in color is likely because Quincy's are humans as well. Then there are differences in physiology. All things that exist within the Bleachverse are made either of reishi, or in other words spirit particles, or keishi, or in other words the physical particles, that are equivalent to our real-life physical matter like atoms, ions, and molecules. The Soul Society in Hueco Mundo is made up of reishi, and the world of the living is made up of keishi, and hence why humans whose bodies are made of keishi must be converted to reishi should they enter into Hueco Mundo or the Soul Society, as explained by Kisuke and demonstrated by his spirit particle conversion machine. Soul Reapers only have a reishi body, in other words a soul or konpaku. They have 2 organs, the hakusui and saketsu. The presence of the saketsu is the litmus test for who is and isn't a Soul Reaper. This organ's function is to boost their spirit energy that was made by the hakusui. The saketsu is the organ that results in the contrast between Soul Reapers and Quincy's. So while Soul Reapers rely on an internal source that they make use of to manifest their power, Quincy's rely on an external source that they make use of to manifest their powers. Destruction of this organ called the Saketsu can permanently render a Soul Reaper incapable of ever using their abilities once more, which Uryu has done quite a few times during his encounter against Soul Reapers throughout the series, and was what Byakuya destroyed during his first encounter with Ichigo. Now, characters like Kukaku and Ginjo, while not being Soul Reapers, should share the same physiology as Soul Reapers. Now, humans have two bodies, a Keishi or physical body, and a Reishi or spirit body, that is their soul or Konpaku. These two bodies are connected via a chain called the Chain of Fate. Quincy's, by virtue of being humans, share this physiology. Yes, this would include the Sternritters, the Vandenreich soldiers, and even Yuha. Yes, Yuha has been called a human explicitly by Ichibei. These Quincy's are capable of existing in the Soul Society, as explained by Kisuke, by converting their Keishi body into a Reishi body, thus resulting in a single body. Next are hollows, and these are a byproduct of a transformation that humans undergo. They only have a Reishi body or soul that has a hole through it due to the self-digestion of the chain of fate called encroachment or shinsoku that ensues due to the chain being broken and the physical body being separated from the soul. The lost part of the soul is what takes the form of a mask that covers their faces. Other categories that exist are hybrids / some combination of the features of the aforementioned categories, and Fullbringers happen to be one such hybrid. They are humans with hollow spirit energy or powers, and are considered to be polar opposites of humans with Soul Reaper powers. In other words, deputy Soul Reapers. Hybrids can form so long as one category gains access to some or all of the features of another category. This gain can be simply a gain of spirit energy with none of the physiology, as in the case of Fullbringers. There are many ways this can happen, and there are many hybrids that can be formed, such as Arankars and Visors, for example. But for our objectives in this video, we shall only be concerned with two types of hybrids, the Fullbringers and the substitute Soul Reapers, and the two ways in which they come about. They could literally be the offspring of the different categories, like Ichigo having a Soul Reaper father and a human mother. This is certainly unusual and involved the aid of Kisuke's Gigai technology that gave Ishin a physical body, turning him into a human Soul Reaper hybrid. More can be said on that, but this method is not very important for our discussion. Now initially, of course under the influence of Tsukishima's Fullbring, Kugo talks of a deputy Soul Reaper, which turns out to be him. He says that this deputy Soul Reaper is born between a Soul Reaper and a human. So it was somewhat implied that Kugo could be like Ichigo with human and Soul Reaper parents, but Kubo mentions in his 2013 interview in Germany that Kugo, being a substitute Soul Reaper, was by way of the transfer process that Rukia carried out at the beginning of the series. As, in Kubo's words, the way of turning a human into a substitute Shinigami had to have been known at the point Rukia turned Ichigo into one. How would she have known of the whole process if she was the first person to ever turn somebody into a substitute Shinigami? This brings us to the second and more important mechanism of forming a hybrid: the transfer process. Transferring power is an ability of Soul Reapers that was explored right at the start of the story, where Rukia transferred her power onto Ichigo via a ritual that involves stabbing him with her Zanpakuto. This resulted in a Soul Reaper human hybrid. For Fullbringers, the remnants of a Hollow's spirit energy that subsist after the Hollow has attacked and wounded their mothers during pregnancy are transferred and assimilated to the human child, resulting in a hybrid. This information actually makes one think of how odd it was that Ichigo did not contemplate the thought of his mother being wounded by a Hollow during her pregnancy, or that he did not ask his father. And when I say ask, I'm talking in an inexplicit fashion. I understand why he wouldn't ask his father directly. At least at the time, he had no powers and was having meetings with strangers that are the Fullbringers. A panel with Masaki in the background, with Ichigo wondering about such an incident, would have been a nice touch. In any case, we later on find out that that likely wasn't the case anyway, as the hollow powers facilitating his Fullbring are likely those of the hollow White that were ever present in Masaki since her fight with and being injured by White. So here is a quick recap of the hoops and detours we've went through until we found out the source of Ichigo's hollow powers. First, Ichigo was a human that sees souls, aka just spiritually aware. Then he got powers from Rukia, becoming a human Soul Reaper hybrid substitute Soul Reaper. Then this power given by Rukia was taken away by Byakuya. Then he was back to just a human. Then Kisuke pops in and informs us that there is actually a second way of turning a human to a Soul Reaper beside the transfer ritual. You are to initiate holification by cutting the chain of fate, and in that middle phase, there is a small window through which one can escape by transforming into a Soul Reaper. And we also find out that he already has Soul Reaper powers by Old Man Zangetsu. From then on, we got moments during which a Hollow would try to take over Ichigo. The best assumption at that time was to assume that that Hollow was a side effect of Kisuke's training, and so in a sense a price Ichigo had to pay in his pursuit to save Rukia. Then we get info from the Fullbringers that Ichigo is a Fullbringer, and Fullbringers have mothers that were attacked by Hollows during pregnancy. So that changed the understanding of where Ichigo's hollow powers come from. Finally, in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, we find out that Masaki was actually attacked by Aizen's artificial hollow white that was made to hollowify people. Remnants of that hollow's power in his mother is the source of his hollow powers. Furthermore, in his fight with Yuha, we finally learn the reason as to how the hollow takes over Ichigo, and that is because there is an equilibrium state in which his Quincy, Soul Reaper, and hollow powers exist. Adding or increasing any one upsets this balance, allowing for the hollow to take over. In his fight with Byakuya, being exposed to Soul Reaper spirit energy upset the balance, and in his encounter with Yami and fight with Ulquiorra, being exposed to their hollow spirit energy upset the balance. Ichigo in his fight with Yuha purposefully uses this fact to his advantage, allowing himself to be hit by Yuha's Quincy spirit pressure so he can allow for the hollow to manifest. The two hybrids we've discussed are polar opposites, as Fullbringers are humans with hollow spirit energy, and deputy Soul Reapers are humans with Soul Reaper spirit energy. Fullbringers as a concept are the natural consequence of thinking, hey, we know humans can gain Soul Reaper powers and form this hybrid, so what if humans gain hollow powers? And thus Fullbringers became an idea. As we've discussed, Soul Reapers are capable of a transfer process such as the one carried out by Rukia. Deputy Soul Reapers, in other words humans with Soul Reaper powers, are capable of executing this transfer process, and this process needs not be consensual. It can quite clearly be carried out forcefully. Using this transfer process, Kugo robbed Ichigo of his powers and allegedly other Soul Reapers, and using the same process, Rukia was able to give Ichigo powers at the start of the story and revive back his powers during the Fullbring arc. Hold on to this dynamic between hybrids, that is the Deputy Soul Reapers and Fullbringers. It's going to be important later. This transfer process has limits though. It's been stated that it's impossible to carry out a total transfer. You could not forcefully take away all the powers of a Soul Reaper. After all, Rukia, even after Ichigo took away, quote, all of her powers, she was able to revive her Soul Reaper powers simply by spending more time in the Soul Society that has a greater Reishi density. The novels further expand on the nature of Fullbringers by declaring that they contain Soul King fragments. You can watch my video on the Soul King to understand more on that. It is of utmost importance to make clear that the novels do not and neither attempt to falsify or negate the fact that the Fullbringers are humans with hollow spirit energy. This is still true even in the novels. This expansion of detail has been done by making use of a few facts that were laid out in the manga. The novels expand particularly on 4 key details that were set in the manga. The fourth will not be discussed in this video, but rather later in the next video, as it has more to do with the social implications of being a Fullbringer than the ability itself. So just keep that in mind and stay tuned. Number 1. The manga states that Fullbringers have hollow spirit energy that comes from hollows that have injured their mothers during pregnancy. The novels expand on that by stating that this is not simply a random event, but rather that the hollows gravitate towards these particular infants specifically due to the fact that they have soul king fragments. Now, this may be viewed and could in fact be an afterthought. What do I mean by that? So, Kugo, during his explanation of what Fullbring is and what is the source of Fullbring power, had he said something along the lines of, Fullbring has something to do with hollow powers, but even we don't entirely understand the origin behind it. But that wasn't the case. He provides what seems to be a complete account of what Fullbring is and does not indicate that there is an additional or unknown factor there. So someone can point at the lack of foreshadowing to this fact. However, on the flip side, this explanation makes better sense to me than just hollow powers. So Fullbring, to give a short explanation, is essentially the ability to exert one's influence onto the souls of objects, and any soul as a matter of fact, and thus influence said object in a variety of different ways, and everything has a soul, so Fullbringers in principle can control anything. The name Fullbring is a reference to how they, quote, fully, unquote, bring out the soul of an object to make use of them. I remember watching the Fullbring arc for the first time and wondering, how in the hell does hollow power explain this? We've discussed how substitute soul reapers are polar opposites of Fullbringers, as has been explicitly stated in the manga. We know that substitute soul reapers just have soul reaper abilities. So following that premise, shouldn't Fullbringers also have just hollow powers? But surprisingly, they do not. I can already hear that one guy typing, Kugos Bankai though. What I'm trying to get at is that Fullbring is certainly not a hollow ability. Hollows don't use or can't use Fullbring, and that's all I need to get my point across. Number 2, the manga has consistently depicted Fullbringers as having unique Fullbring abilities that they manifest via an object they have an attachment towards. This unique ability, for the most part, matches something that is true about their character or something that they have sentiment towards. The novels expand on that by stating that the Soul King fragments they hold function as a sort of pseudo-proto-hogyoku by bringing their desires into fruition in the form of a unique ability they can activate via a corresponding object that they have an attachment to. This is further showcased by the fact that they awaken their Fullbring usually during moments at which they express or contemplate sentiments that are unique to their personhood. Case number 1, Chad. Chad, contemplating the discrimination he faced for his skin color and his grandfather's advice for him to have pride in himself, was what helped him awaken his Fullbring. Why are you always so mean? This question asked to Karin by her friends is what prompted Chad to recall his past. The same question has been asked to him by his grandfather. As a dark-skinned boy in Japan, Chad was picked on and perhaps bullied to the point of tearing up. In response to this discrimination, Chad would use his burly arms and fists to physically hurt those that hurt him. After which his grandfather asked him what that had accomplished. What happens after that? He is tall, He is handsome. Those were the traits many wish for, is what his grandfather told him. In other words, he tells him to have pride in himself. However, his grandfather also informs him that in the part of the world they occupy, being different attracted discrimination. But that did not justify using his strong fists to physically hurt those who hurt him. He advised him to be kind. Chad ultimately declared to have learned his lesson. My large fists aren't for hurting people. They are for protecting my mighty body. I've learned my lesson. I know that now. So please, give me the power. And hence, his Fullbring was awakened. In Orihime's case, she has always been exposed to situations of harm that warrant protection. As young as an infant, her brother Sora had to flee with her because of how abusive their parents were. Oh, so monstrous and abusive that they would go as far as beating an infant. She had always been under her brother's care and protection. Later on in school, a senior bully in her school would cut her hair simply because she found the color distasteful. The same hair that her brother complimented. Certainly the bully wasn't trying to give her a 5-star salon haircut, hence why Orihime had to cut her hair to even it out. Ever since then, she had always been averse to growing her hair. After her brother's death, a girl named Tatsuki would be the one next in line to protect Orihime. I have a rule that anyone that makes Orihime cry, I shall beat the snot out of them, Tatsuki says. Tatsuki became the reason she was able to grow her hair back. What's curious about Orihime is that despite all these situations she has always found herself in, she never had the desire to protect anyone, not even herself, contrary to what would be expected. She had always been the one on the receiving end. She was the one that required protection and not the people protecting her. But that changed when faced with a malicious hollow called Numb Chandelier that has the ability to take control of people and did not hesitate to hurt Tatsuki and Orihime herself. Then was the time and the first time she ever had the desire and wish to protect someone, and hence her powers were awakened. Finally comes Ichigo. Ichigo activates his Fullbring under the guidance of Chad. Ichigo's goal and desire at the time was to regain his Soul Reaper powers. As such, Chad advised Ichigo, much like how he activated his own Fullbring, to think about the time when he was most proud of his Soul Reaper powers. And in Chad's own words, that deputy badge will respond to your wish. And so it did, and hence he activated his Fullbring. In these cases, there is a clear-cut depiction of someone wishing and wanting something to happen, and that happening following the wish made. The rest of the Fullbringers can be described to have awakened their powers in a similar fashion. Let's consider Riruka, Giriko, Yukio, and Jackie. For Giriko, initially he thought of the watch his family inherited as a god, as he believed it was the reason for why his family has escaped so many misfortunes and encounters with fires unscathed. This is also the reason why the watch is called the Watch of Good Fortunes. He prayed to it and consistently found his wishes to come true. Eventually, he came to believe that that very power was his own. Wanting to test its limits, he experimented on his wife by desiring that she dies with his sight alone. It worked, but that was when he desired the wish be nulled, and as a result, he lost his eye as a compensation for breaking the contract, thus discovering what the watch really does was making contracts. For Riruka, her Fullbring corresponds to her desire to keep/hide things she wants to keep for herself, which usually were things that she thought were cute. Riruka says in her younger years, "Everything I wanted becomes mine if I hid it." Her Fullbring seems to be a fantastical expression of that desire. Yukio has always been self-centered and reserved. We find out that his parents locked and abandoned him in a large room that, quote, had everything inside it, unquote. Everything but his parents, which he used to create simulations of and converse with using his Fullbring. Similarly, his Fullbring creates dimensions blocking outside interaction, and in the dimension, he has supreme control and could do everything he wanted. Invaders Must Die, the name of his Fullbring, can certainly be viewed as an expression of his desire for and embracement of the seclusion he has experienced. However, for Jackie, this pseudo Hogyoku theory can only be consistent if we were to make certain assumptions. For example, Jackie's Fullbring was awakened when the boots her father gifted her were soiled by her dead brother's blood and the devastation she experienced by witnessing that. Not only her brother, but her entire family was murdered. We can certainly extrapolate from that to say that her Fullbring was exactly activated then and there because she despised her weakness and lack of ability to do anything and wished that wasn't the case. Hence her Fullbring granting her power. As we know, a Hogyoku need not grant explicit desire or the wishes we say outwardly. It reads one's heart and grants what they truly desire. So what you say you want can be different from what you actually want, and as such, what the Hogyoku grants you can be different from what you say you want. Case in point, Rukia during her transfer of powers to Ichigo mentions how she initially only wanted to transfer half of her powers to Ichigo, but he somehow took all. Aizen later states that this phenomena was a byproduct of the Hogyoku, because after Kaion's death, or rather, Rukia killing him, she desired deep within her that she wasn't a Soul Reaper. We have no idea when or around when Kugo, Shukuro, and Moe activated their Fullbring and the surrounding circumstances. What can only be said about Shukuro is that his interest in books mirrors his ability, as his ability is one that, quote, bookmarks, unquote, alternate pasts. The metaphor here can be understood by thinking of, say, your life or anyone's life and past as a page in a book that has been bookmarked. And other pages are the alternate possibilities of how things could have occurred. Tsukishima's ability in this metaphor is to turn the page and bookmark the possibility that he deems desirable. On to number 3. The manga states that Fullbring is the result of hollow spirit energy being mixed with a human. The novels expand on that by stating that the hollow spirit energy, along with the Soul King fragment, together cause Fullbring. In other words, just mixing hollow spirit energy with a human is not the only cause of Fullbring, but rather the mixing results in Fullbring because they already have something else within them, in other words, a Soul King fragment. The hollow spirit energy still being a requirement is demonstrated by the fact that the so-called Soul King fragment is actually inherited from generation to generation. An example is how it's been stated that Aura's mother has a Soul King fragment, but yet isn't a Fullbringer, thus implying that the Soul King fragment is not sufficient on its own. So think of the Soul King fragment as a button for turning on Fullbring that is pressed by hollow spirit energy. This has caused somewhat of a controversy as the novels declare rather explicitly that Orihime is a Fullbringer, which on the other hand has not been declared in the manga. Trust me, I used to be one of those who would fight tooth and nail if I heard someone calling Orihime a Fullbringer. Fullbringers having a fragment of the Soul King was much more close to what I would have expected to have been the source of Orihime's unique abilities. As a matter of fact, there were many fan theories made way before the novels were made that speculated that Orihime is related to the Soul King in some way or the other. There are basically 3 details that one can point to in order to try and establish that Orihime is a Fullbringer, all of which start by pointing out that she is a human. Number 1. Perhaps the most powerful argument in favor of classifying her as a Fullbringer is that she has been compared to Hachigen, a visor that has Soul Reaper and Hollow powers. In a chapter titled Slip Through My Barrier, Orihime was not only able to slip through Hachigen's barrier, but she even explicitly states that her Santen Keshun barrier is very similar to Hachigen's, a barrier made with Hollow Spirit energy. This is further elaborated on by Hachigen as he clarifies that passing through the barrier should especially be impossible because the barrier he made is one that was original and was developed after he became a visored, in other words, after gaining Hollow Spirit energy. He noted that because of that, no Soul Reaper should be able to just pass through his barrier, and so it was suspected that it would have been some other visored. In other words, someone with Hollow Spirit energy. But he considered even that to be unlikely, as he states that not even a visored should be able to just slip through. Not only from Orihime's side, but later on, Hachi further states that he has analyzed her spiritual pressure up close and concluded that her shield creating abilities were very similar to his own. Again, this is based on spiritual pressure analysis. Number 2. Ryukin had a conversation with Orihime after tending to his injured son Uryu that we later on find out was attacked by Kugo Ginjo, who is a Fullbringer. Ryukin informs Orihime that whatever the spiritual pressure that subsisted on Uryu from the attack was something he never encountered before, so he could not say much about it except that it was certainly of a human. He further states that whoever attacked Uryu has powers closer to Chad and Orihime. Now, of course, he also states that Uryu would fit into that category of the attacker who was Ginjo. As Uryu was included, this renders the use of Ryukin's statement as a poor justification. All in all, Ryukin's statements amounted to saying that whoever the attacker is was a human with spiritual powers. Period. Number 3. How her powers work. Several overlaps in detail are noted between how Orihime's powers work and that of the other Fullbringers, such as how her powers are activated via an object that she has an attachment to and has lived a long time with, and how the object emanates light at activation. Light emanation being a characteristic feature of Fullbring. A counter-argument to this is to point to the fact that unlike any Fullbringer, Orihime brings forth intelligent, sentient beings more akin to a Zanpakuto than Fullbring. And what of it? Chad is the only Fullbringer whose Fullbring object is a body part, his skin. This is certainly an inadequate counter because never has it ever been implied that Fullbringers cannot bring forth intelligent life like Orihime does. Now on to the other hand. There are 3 details that people now can point to in order to justify that at the very least Orihime is not confirmed. You cannot confirm that Orihime is a Fullbringer. Number 1, lack of acknowledgement by Fullbringers. This, on the other hand, is the most powerful case for the opposing side. One can point to the fact that she was not acknowledged as a Fullbringer explicitly or implicitly by the Fullbringers. They made no statements about her and never really proposed that she joins execution. Not a single statement claiming her or her powers as Fullbring were made throughout an entire arc dedicated to Fullbringers. And then you also never get a statement in the 1000-year Blood War arc as well. This, however, is in contrast to Chad, for whom such statements are present. One can take that as an obvious implication that she isn't a Fullbringer, no matter how similar to them she appears to be. Number 2, lack of resonance with hollows. Unlike Chad that has gone on length describing how he felt at home in Hueco Mundo, Orihime was not shown to have any such experience, even after coming into close proximity to so many Arancars. Number 3, she was stated by Aizen to bypass divine law and has been consistently unique and outstanding in such a way that was different from Chad and potentially any other Fullbringer. Much like how Soul Reapers have different Zanpakuto with differing abilities, some more outstanding than others, Hyoka Suigetsu is of course more remarkable than Hozukimaru, yet both are Zanpakuto nonetheless. The same applies to Fullbringers. Even if one were to demonstrate that Orihime is in fact divine, whatever that means, you would have done only half the job. Because, for this argument to be valid, it would have to assume that being divine means one cannot be a Fullbringer. The two need not be mutually exclusive. You could be divine and a Fullbringer at the same time. So here's the thing, you guys, when coming to drawing conclusions, a scientific, or rather any reasonable approach, goes as follows. When you have no data, you don't get to make any claims. When you have some data, you can then make hypotheses. You get to say maybe this or maybe that is taking place, but you need enough or more data to get to the point where you say, therefore this. In other words, reach a conclusion, and with Orihime, especially with respect to the manga, I think it is within the hypothesis stage where I see what's going on. I see there's enough reason to say that she may be something completely unique or a Fullbringer, but not enough to reach a conclusion either way. My position has been that she has not been confirmed to be a Fullbringer, which is different from saying that she is not a Fullbringer. People usually equivocate the two positions. Suffice it to say, it's pretty clear, at least to me, that the manga does indeed not confirm Orihime to be a Fullbringer. Even those that think it was obvious that she is are likely to agree with me that the manga stays suspiciously silent about making any comment declaring her to be a Fullbringer or calling her abilities Fullbring, neither in the Fullbring arc or later in the Thousand Year Blood War arc. However, her being declared a Fullbringer certainly results in no contradictions, so it's definitely not inconsistent should Kubo call her Fullbringer. This is a pretty common writing technique, where a writer keeps a particular detail vague or unknown. This can be for various different reasons, like the writer reserving more options for later rather than potentially writing themselves into a corner. A similar example of such a writing technique is with regards to the question of when exactly Kisuke hid the Hogyoku inside of Rukia. Many are of the belief that it had occurred when she lost her powers and was offered a Gigai by Kisuke. Yet, Aizen's words suggest otherwise, and I quote, "It was called Hogyoku. It was very dangerous, or at least he seemed to think, as he tried to destroy it. However, he found that he could not. Reluctantly, he did what he had to do. Urahara placed a protective shell around the Hogyoku. By doing so, he was able to implant it deep within a person's konpaku. Do you understand? The hiding place he chose was you, Rukia Kuchiki." He then goes on to say, "By the time I discovered this secret, you had already gone missing in the world of the living." So there has always been a secret place, and Aizen has been searching for this quote secret place unquote that turns out to be Rukia. And this treasure hunt was already something Aizen was doing before Rukia was ever offered a Gigai by Kisuke. Now, to be sure, Aizen later on, during his conversation with Ichigo, insinuates that what he had said then was not entirely honest, as in his own words, I quote, "And was I really unable to detect the Hogyoku's location for 100 years after its creation?" Thus nullifying the treasure hunt that he declared to have engaged in at the end of Soul Society arc. Furthermore, he states that he sent Rukia intentionally to Karakura Town in order to test his hypothesis on the mechanism behind the Hogyoku's function. Moving on, Bleach has a collection of 3 chapters that can be called Chapter 0, the pilot chapter of the Bleach series, and 2 other chapters that detail events that have taken place before the very first chapter of Bleach, one from the perspective of Ichigo, titled Chapter 0, Side A, and another from the perspective of Rukia, titled Chapter 0, Side B. These chapters were released in extra manga material, with Side A being part of the first official character book, Souls, and Side B being part of the first official animation book, Vibes. These 2 extra manga material were released alongside one another. It even seems that a poem that starts at the cover of Souls is only finished by the poem at the cover of Vibes. The rain drags black sun down, but the rain dried by the white moon. There is even a comma there. Substitute the black sun with Ichigo and white moon with Rukia and it'll make sense. Rukia and Ichigo are even drawn in such a way that when you place the books side by side, Ichigo and Rukia are facing one another. I've already deviated enough, but not going too much into details. Rain in Bleach is synonymous to anything that makes Ichigo sad, anything that makes him down. These two chapters are included in volume 23 of the Bleach manga, so you'll find them there too. What's relevant here is that Kiyone mentions that Rukia has traveled to the world of the living as Kiyone's aide, but for some reason is unable to recall the journey, for which it has been conjectured that Kisuke may have altered her memory, and that was when he placed the Hogyoku within her. This interpretation certainly has its issues, like why'd Kisuke hide the Hogyoku within a Soul Reaper that is in close proximity to Aizen? But the only subject of relevance right now is discussing this particular writing technique and not the veracity of the different interpretations. Finally, Tite Kubo, in his 2008 interview with Anime Insiders magazine, when asked as to when exactly the Hogyoku had been hidden within Rukia, he replies saying, "It's a secret." So when did Kisuke hide the Hogyoku inside Rukia? Did he place it within her when she was in Rokongai before fleeing Soul Society? And how old or young was she? An infant or a toddler? Or did he hide it within her when she was a Soul Reaper? You heard the answer right out of the horse's mouth. It's a secret. I'd also like to keep you guys aware of the timeline. So this interview happens before the chapter where Aizen basically admits that he was never on a Hogyoku hunt. He'd already known where it was and intentionally sent Rukia to test the Hogyoku. On the other hand, the interview happens after the chapter zeros that have been discussed were released. So interview in 2008, chapter zeros in 2006, and Aizen's admission in 2010. We just received a shrug of God from Kubo with regards to when Kisuke hid the Hogyoku within Rukia. This is named Shrug of God, God here referring to the author, by tvtropes.org. This could be anywhere from the author saying, "I don't know," to "I won't tell you." They usually add paradigm quotations or examples at the top of the page that illustrates the subject matter. In this case, they showcase how a playwright called Samuel Beckett has a play called Waiting for Godot, in which two characters, Valdemir and Estragon, engage in a variety of discussions and encounters while awaiting for Godot, who never arrives. In any case, Samuel Beckett, when asked in an interview as to who this Godot is, he simply replies, "If I knew, I would have said so in the play." And as mentioned, the shrug of God need not be an "I don't know." It could be anywhere from "I don't know" to "I won't tell you." Now that you understand what Fullbringers are, then I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye!